Long before the rise of civilizations, before tools, before language, and before even the first human ancestors took shape, the Earth was young, violent, and unrecognizable to the world we know today. To trace the untold story of prehistoric life, we must travel backward, not thousands of years, not even millions, but billions, to an age when our planet was still forging itself out of cosmic chaos. The story of life begins not with people or even with animals, but with a world of fire and stone, water and storm, where existence itself was uncertain and fragile. The Earth was formed roughly 4.5 billion years ago, born from the collisions of countless pieces of dust, rock, and gas orbiting the young sun. Gravity pulled this matter together, compressing it into a sphere. The process was violent, and the result was not a paradise but a planet engulfed in fire. The surface boiled with molten rock, oceans did not yet exist, and the sky was thick with choking gases. For millions of years, asteroids rained down from space, hammering the Earth with devastating impacts. Each strike unleashed unimaginable heat, melting the crust again and again. Volcanoes erupted in endless fury, covering the planet in lava. And yet, slowly, conditions began to change. As time passed, the planet cooled. A thin crust formed over the molten core, and water vapor, once trapped in the atmosphere, condensed and fell as rain. But this was no ordinary rainfall. It lasted not for days or weeks, but for thousands of years, filling the great basins of the world with water. Thus, the first oceans were born. These were no clear, calm seas like we know today. They were dark, turbulent, and thick with dissolved minerals, heated from beneath by volcanic vents. Yet it was in these very waters that the miracle of life took its first breath. The precise origin of life remains a mystery, but many scientists believe it began in the depths of those primeval oceans. Perhaps it was in the boiling hydrothermal vents along the seafloor, where minerals and heat created the perfect conditions for chemical reactions. Perhaps it was in shallow tidal pools, where sunlight and lightning struck mixtures of organic compounds. Wherever it occurred, the result was the same: the birth of the first living organisms, tiny, single-celled life forms. They were microscopic, invisible to the naked eye, but they represented the most significant leap forward in Earth's history. For nearly 2 billion years, these single-celled organisms were the masters of the planet. They multiplied, adapted, and began to shape the very environment around them. Some developed the ability to use sunlight for energy through photosynthesis. With this power, they released oxygen into the atmosphere, a gas that was at first toxic to most existing life. For countless generations, oxygen built up slowly, transforming Earth's skies and oceans. This event, known as the Great Oxidation, changed everything. It cleared the path for more complex organisms, and it altered the chemistry of the planet itself. By around 600 million years ago, after billions of years of microbial dominance, life began to evolve into more complex forms. Tiny multicellular organisms appeared, clinging to survival in the ancient seas. These creatures were still simple by our standards, but they represented the first steps toward the diversity of life that would one day fill the world. They learned to specialize. Some cells focused on movement, others on feeding, others on reproduction. Cooperation among cells allowed bodies to grow larger, stronger, and more efficient. Then, around 541 million years ago, something extraordinary happened. The Cambrian explosion. In a relatively short period of geological time, life diversified. With astonishing speed, oceans that had once been home only to small, simple creatures now teemed with an explosion of new forms. Hard shells and exoskeletons appeared for the first time, giving protection and strength. Eyes developed, allowing animals to see predators and prey. Mouths and jaws formed, enabling more efficient feeding. It was a revolution of survival strategies, and the seas became battlegrounds of innovation. Strange and alien creatures ruled these waters. Trilobites, with their armored bodies and compound eyes, crawled across the seafloor in vast numbers. Spiky predators like Anomalocaris, with grasping appendages and sharp mouths, prowled the oceans hunting smaller prey. Worms, sponges, and arthropods spread across every habitat, each carving out a niche in this new ecosystem. For the first time in Earth's history, a food chain existed, with hunters and hunted, survival and extinction. The Cambrian seas were not just about violence, though they were laboratories of possibility. From this explosion of diversity came the ancestors of nearly every major animal group we know today. Fish-like creatures with primitive backbones appeared, laying the foundation for vertebrates, the group that would one day include reptiles, birds, mammals, and humans. It is almost impossible to imagine that in these alien oceans over 500 million years ago, the story of humanity was already beginning, hidden within the body of a small, primitive creature swimming through dark waters. But survival was never guaranteed. Earth's history is written in cycles of growth and catastrophe, and mass extinctions have repeatedly reshaped the course of life. Around 450 million years ago, a great ice age struck, freezing much of the planet and devastating marine life. Yet those that survived adapted and diversified once again. Plants began to colonize land, spreading across barren rock with the help of roots and leaves. Insects followed, crawling and buzzing through the ancient landscapes. Soon the first vertebrates, fish-like creatures with sturdy fins, ventured from the seas onto land, taking hesitant steps into a new world. The conquest of land was one of the most significant turning points in Earth's story. It was not easy. Early amphibians had to return to the water to reproduce, and the land was harsh and exposed. But the potential rewards were immense. The land was rich in plants and untouched by predators. Over time, creatures evolved stronger limbs, tougher skins, and new ways to breathe air. Slowly, the barren continents came alive with forests, insects, and animals. By the end of this chapter in Earth's history, the world had transformed beyond recognition. From a fiery sphere of molten rock, it had become a planet of oceans, skies, and land. From single-celled organisms, it had given rise to forests, fish, amphibians, and the first reptiles. The stage was set for even greater dramas, the rise of mighty creatures that would dominate the Earth for millions of years, and the long chain of survival that would ultimately lead to us. The dawn of existence was not a single moment, but a slow and relentless unfolding, driven by chance, by struggle, and by adaptation. Every breath we take today, every plant, every animal, and every human being alive owes its existence to those fragile first sparks of life that clung to survival in ancient seas billions of years ago. It was here, in the depths of time, that the untold story of prehistoric life truly began. After the dawn of existence had given birth to oceans filled with strange and alien creatures, the story of life pressed forward with relentless determination. The early seas of the Cambrian had seen an explosion of diversity, but what followed was no less extraordinary. From the water, creatures would crawl onto the land. From fragile beginnings, entire kingdoms of animals and plants would rise. And as the continents grew green with life, one group would seize its chance to dominate: the planet, the reptiles. Their reign would stretch across millions upon millions of years, culminating in the rule of the most iconic creatures ever to walk the earth, the dinosaurs. The transition to land had begun tentatively with amphibians, creatures that could breathe air yet remained tied to water for reproduction. They were pioneers but not conquerors. Their soft skin and reliance on moist environments limited their reach. Reptiles, however, changed everything. With tough, scaly skin that resisted drying out and the remarkable invention of the amniotic egg, they broke free from the shackles of water. For the first time, animals could live and reproduce entirely on land. This was a revolution in survival strategy, and it gave reptiles a decisive advantage. By around 300 million years ago, vast forests covered the continents. Towering ferns and giant horsetails formed lush green jungles, and enormous insects buzzed through the thick, oxygen-rich air. It was a world both alien and familiar, where dragonflies had wingspans as wide as hawks, and millipedes grew longer than humans are tall. Among these colossal plants and insects, the reptiles thrived. Crocodile-like predators lurked in swamps, while herbivorous lizard-like creatures grazed on low vegetation. Life had found stability, but stability on Earth is always temporary. Around 252 million years ago came one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history, the Permian-Triassic extinction, also called the Great Dying. In a geologic blink of time, nearly 90% of all species vanished. Volcanic eruptions released torrents of lava and poisonous gases, altering the climate. Oceans turned acidic, temperatures soared, and ecosystems collapsed. The world was left almost barren, a wasteland where survival seemed nearly impossible. But mass extinctions, as devastating as they are, also clear the way for new beginnings. From the ashes of the Permian, a new age emerged. The Mesozoic era, often called the Age of Reptiles. It was during this time that the most famous creatures in Earth's history would rise, the dinosaurs. In the Triassic period, the earliest dinosaurs were small and unremarkable, overshadowed by other reptilian groups. Yet they carried within them traits that would one day make them unstoppable: upright posture, efficient lungs, and adaptability. Over millions of years, these small beginnings grew into giants that would dominate land, sea, and sky. The Jurassic and Cretaceous periods were their golden age. Dinosaurs spread across every continent, evolving into a staggering variety of forms. Some grew to colossal sizes, like the long-necked sauropods, whose massive bodies stretched longer than city buses and whose necks reached the tops of the tallest trees. Others became swift and deadly predators, such as Allosaurus, and later the infamous Tyrannosaurus rex, apex hunters with teeth like serrated knives. Armored dinosaurs developed spiked tails and plated backs, while others evolved horns and frills for defense or display. Each was a masterpiece of adaptation, sculpted by millions of years of evolution. But dinosaurs were not alone in ruling this prehistoric world. In the skies, flying reptiles called pterosaurs mastered the art of flight, gliding over coastlines and snatching fish from the waves. In the oceans, marine reptiles such as ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs dominated with sleek, powerful bodies, rivaling modern whales and sharks in size and ferocity. The age of reptiles was not confined to land. It was a global empire stretching into every environment. Plants, too, were undergoing revolutions of their own. The first flowering. Plants appeared, bringing new colors and scents into ancient landscapes. Insects adapted alongside them, creating relationships that would one day shape the modern world's ecosystems. The Earth was alive with motion, with sound, with competition, and with change. Yet for all their success, even the mightiest creatures could not escape the cycles of catastrophe that had always defined life on this planet. 66 million years ago, the reign of the dinosaurs came to a sudden and violent end. A massive asteroid struck the Earth near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, unleashing destruction on a scale unimaginable. The impact released more energy than billions of atomic bombs, igniting global wildfires and throwing clouds of dust and debris into the atmosphere. Sunlight was blocked, temperatures plummeted, and ecosystems collapsed. In a matter of years, the mighty dinosaurs, creatures that had dominated for over 150 million years, were gone. Only birds, their feathered descendants, carried their legacy forward. The extinction of the dinosaurs was one of the most pivotal turning points in Earth's history. For as the giants fell, new opportunities opened for the small, the overlooked, and the survivors waiting in the shadows. Among these survivors were mammals, small, furry creatures that had scurried in the underbrush during the dinosaurs' reign, never able to compete with their size and power. Now, with the great reptiles gone, mammals would rise to fill the empty niches of the world. The age of reptiles had ended, but it left behind a legacy of awe and wonder. Fossils buried in stone record their stories, reminding us of the incredible diversity of life and the fragility of survival. Their time as masters of the wild shaped the earth, altered its ecosystems, and set the stage for the next great chapter in life's history, the rise of the mammals and eventually the emergence of humanity itself. The reptiles had ruled with unmatched dominance. For millions of years, they were the undisputed masters of the wild, their forms filling the skies, the seas, and the land. Their extinction was not the end of life, but a transformation, a passing of the torch to new creatures, waiting to inherit the earth. And so, as one era closed, another began. The stage was cleared for a new cast of characters, small, warm-blooded, intelligent, and adaptable. They would grow, evolve, and eventually become the architects of civilization. But before that, they would first have to survive in a world still dangerous, still changing, still ruled by nature's unforgiving hand. The age of mammals was about to begin. The fall of the dinosaurs marked not only the end of an age, but also the beginning of an entirely new one. 66 million years ago, when the asteroid struck the Earth and extinguished nearly 3/4 of all life, it seemed as though the story of existence had reached its darkest chapter. Yet in that darkness, new life stirred. In the shadow of catastrophe, survivors emerged to claim a world forever changed. Among the most unlikely of these survivors were the mammals, small, warm-blooded, and seemingly insignificant creatures that had endured in the underbrush during the age of reptiles. With the giants gone, they would rise, adapt, and eventually dominate the earth in ways that even the dinosaurs never achieved. For over 150 million years, mammals had lived in the margins, overshadowed by the towering reptiles that ruled land, sea, and sky. Their ancestors had first appeared during the late Triassic period, around the same time as the earliest dinosaurs. They were small, shrew-like creatures, nocturnal and timid, feeding on insects and hiding in burrows to avoid predators. For all their evolutionary advantages, fur for warmth, live birth for protection of young and warm-blooded metabolism for endurance, they simply could not compete with the dominance of the reptiles. The world was too crowded with giants, and mammals were forced to remain in the shadows. But survival in the shadows built resilience. Mammals were adaptable. They could regulate their body temperature, survive in cold or heat, hunt at night when reptiles were less active, and reproduce more effectively than creatures that laid eggs. Their small size required fewer resources, allowing them to endure scarcity when others starved. These traits, which once confined them to the sidelines, became their greatest strengths when disaster struck. The asteroid impact that ended the reign of the dinosaurs created a world of ash and fire. Forests burned, skies darkened, and plants withered in the absence of sunlight. Herbivores starved, predators fell soon after, and the intricate web of ecosystems unraveled. Large creatures were the first to die, for they required more food and could not adapt quickly enough. Yet mammals, small and resourceful, found ways to persist. They burrowed underground to escape the worst of the devastation. They fed on seeds, roots, and insects, resources that endured even in the bleakest times. In a world where size had once been strength, now it was weakness. Survival belonged to the small, the nimble, and the adaptable. As the earth slowly healed, mammals began to spread into the niches left empty by the fallen reptiles. Over millions of years, their forms diversified into an astonishing array of shapes and sizes. Some remained small, continuing the ancient traditions of insect hunting and burrow dwelling. Others grew larger, exploring the possibilities of new diets and habitats. The age of mammals had begun, and the planet itself became their canvas. The Paleocene epoch, immediately following the dinosaurs' extinction, was a time of experimentation. Mammals expanded into roles once occupied by reptiles. Some evolved into hoofed herbivores, grazing on plants that spread across the recovering landscapes. Others became predators, filling the void left by the great carnivorous dinosaurs. Forests regrew, and mammals climbed into the trees, evolving grasping limbs and keen eyesight. The first primates emerged, small creatures leaping through branches, their future significance unknown, yet monumental. By the Eocene epoch, around 50 million years ago, mammals had exploded into diversity. Vast forests stretched across the continents, warm climates nurtured abundance, and creatures of extraordinary form roamed the earth. Giant flightless birds, some taller than a man, became apex predators in certain regions. Hoofed mammals flourished, evolving into early relatives of horses, deer, and elephants. Whales, whose ancestors had once walked on land, returned to the sea, transforming into powerful marine giants that rivaled even the ancient reptiles in dominance. It was an age of innovation, where nature tested countless possibilities. Yet evolution is never linear, never simple. Entire lineages rose and fell, creatures thriving for millions of years only to vanish into extinction. Some mammals became titans of their time. Indricotherium, a distant relative of the rhinoceros, grew to be the largest land mammal ever, towering over trees and weighing more than any modern elephant. Saber-toothed predators stalked prey with fangs like daggers, blending stealth with raw power. In South America, giant sloths the size of small cars roamed forests and plains, while armored mammals developed protective shells against hungry hunters. Still, it was not only size that defined the mammal's rise. Intelligence, adaptability, and social cooperation began to play larger roles in survival. Herding behaviors developed, protecting groups from predators. Parental care grew more advanced, with mothers nurturing and teaching their young. Some species relied on teamwork in hunting, while others forged complex relationships with their environment. Mammals were not just bodies filling space, they were thinkers, problem solvers, survivors in ways more subtle than brute strength. Among this grand unfolding of life, one branch of mammals began a path that would one day change the earth forever: the primates. They were small, tree-dwelling creatures with forward-facing eyes, grasping hands, and growing intelligence. Over millions of years, they would evolve into monkeys, apes, and ultimately humans. But in the vast story of the age of mammals, this was still only the beginning of their journey. As time passed, climates shifted again and again. Ice ages came and went, reshaping landscapes and challenging survival. Each change brought extinctions, but each also brought opportunities for adaptation. Mammals endured because they could change, altering diets, moving into new territories, adjusting behaviors. The same resilience that had carried them through the asteroid impact continued to carry them forward through every trial. The age of mammals was not simply the story of creatures replacing dinosaurs. It was the story of life, itself embracing adaptability over rigidity, intelligence over brute force, endurance over dominance. In the absence of giants, a new kind of mastery emerged, not built on towering size or impenetrable armor, but on flexibility, learning, and persistence. By the time humanity would eventually appear, the world was already shaped by millions of years of mammalian innovation. The predators and prey, the forests and plains, the oceans and skies, All had been molded by the experiments of evolution carried out in the age of mammals. The groundwork was laid for the emergence of one species whose intelligence would surpass all others, whose tools and societies would reshape the earth itself. But that moment was still far in the future. For now the mammals ruled in their own way, giants of the land, lords of the sea, masters of survival. Their story was not yet civilization, but it was the foundation upon which civilization would one day stand. From shrew-like ancestors to towering beasts, from burrows to oceans, their rise was nothing short of extraordinary, and yet the greatest chapter of their story was only just beginning. For among the primates, in the forests of Africa, evolution was quietly working on a transformation unlike any before. The first humans were on the horizon. The age of mammals had prepared the stage. The story of civilization was waiting to be born. From the vast forests, sprawling plains, and treacherous landscapes shaped by millions of years of evolution, a new story began to take form. The story of the first humans. While mammals had dominated the earth, adapting, diversifying, and conquering every environment after the fall of the dinosaurs, one branch of primates was beginning a journey unlike any other. Small, intelligent, and observant, these early ancestors of humanity were poised to step onto the stage of history, guided not by brute strength or size, but by curiosity, cooperation, and the spark of innovation. The earliest primates had already evolved millions of years before. Their anatomy, with grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, and agile bodies, was perfectly suited for life in the trees. They could leap from branch to branch, snatch fruit, and spot predators from afar. Over time, these creatures diversified, giving rise to monkeys, apes, and eventually a line that would walk upright, Australopithecus. This genus, appearing in Africa roughly 4 million years ago, was the first to combine bipedal movement with intelligence. Standing on two legs freed their hands to explore tools, to manipulate objects, and to begin the slow process of shaping the world around them. Life for these early humans was never easy. Africa, while rich in resources, was a land of predators and extreme conditions. Giant cats, leopards, hyenas, and packs of hunting canids threatened every step. The climate shifted unpredictably, alternating between lush forests and dry savannas. Survival depended on more than strength. It required ingenuity. Australopithecus developed strategies to find and gather food efficiently. They learned to climb trees for safety and forage in groups for protection. They were observant, cautious, and adaptable, traits that would define humanity for millennia to come. Around 2.5 million years ago, a remarkable evolutionary leap occurred. Homo habilis, often called the handy man, emerged. With a larger brain than Australopithecus and hands capable of precise movements, Homo habilis began using tools, not simple sticks, but sharpened stones for cutting, scraping, and pounding. These tools were not just instruments, they were extensions of the mind, early signs that humans could alter their environment to serve their needs. Tools allowed them to access meat from carcasses, crack nuts, and shape shelters, giving them an advantage in survival that few other creatures could match. Alongside tool-making came cooperation. Early humans began to live in small, loosely organized groups relying on communication, shared knowledge, and social bonds to survive. Each individual had a role, whether foraging, scouting, or protecting the group from predators. This cooperation was as essential to survival as physical strength, and it laid the foundation for the complex social structures that would define human societies thousands of years later. By about 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus appeared, a species more advanced, more resilient, and more adaptable than any before. Taller, stronger, and equipped with even larger brains, Homo erectus spread beyond Africa, venturing into Asia and Europe. They were the first humans to leave their ancestral homeland, traveling into unfamiliar and sometimes hostile lands, guided, by intelligence, memory, and strategy. Alongside their expansion came one of humanity's most important discoveries: fire. Controlling fire allowed Homo erectus to cook food, ward off predators, and survive in colder climates. Fire became a tool, a weapon, and a symbol of power over the environment. The landscapes these early humans inhabited were filled with giants. Mammoths roamed the plains, giant sloths lingered in forests, and saber-toothed cats prowled the shadows. Every day was a contest of wits, endurance, and adaptability. Humans learned to hunt cooperatively, using traps, ambushes, and coordinated strategies to bring down prey far larger and stronger than themselves. They also scavenged, taking advantage of opportunities that other predators missed, and gradually mastered the delicate balance between risk and reward. Over hundreds of thousands of years, humans evolved further. Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and Denisovans carried larger brains, more sophisticated tools, and emerging forms of culture. Burial rituals began to appear, hinting at an awareness of mortality and possibly a belief in life beyond death. Art, symbolism, and decoration appeared in rudimentary forms, demonstrating that humans were not merely surviving, they were beginning to reflect on their world. Adaptation remained central to survival. Ice ages forced humans to innovate. Clothing, shelters, and fire allowed them to endure extreme cold. Migration followed resources and favorable climates, spreading humanity across continents. Each step required observation, planning, and communication, reinforcing the importance of intelligence alongside instinct. Humans learned not just to react to the world, but to shape it, preparing for the next great leaps in evolution. By the time the last ice age was approaching its peak, humans were no longer mere survivors. They were thinkers, hunters, tool makers, and storytellers. Their brains had grown not just in size, but in complexity. They could plan, remember, innovate, and cooperate. The earliest signs of language were taking root, and with language came the ability to share knowledge, teach, and create a collective memory. Culture, once a distant concept, was beginning to emerge. The first humans were fragile, yet unstoppable. They were at the mercy of the elements, predators, and scarcity, yet they endured and flourished. Every decision, every adaptation, and every innovation carried the weight of survival, shaping not only their lives, but the destiny of all life that would follow. The story of these early humans is not simply one of biology, but of intelligence, resilience, and the first steps toward mastery over the world. From shivering in the forests of Africa to lighting fires, crafting tools, and walking into new continents, the journey of the first humans is a story of extraordinary courage, ingenuity, and determination. The age of mammals had prepared the stage, and now humanity was taking its first steps. The story of survival, innovation, and the untold mysteries of prehistoric life was entering a new chapter. From the dawn of upright walking to the mastery of fire, from primitive tools to the spark of culture, the first humans were laying the foundation of everything that would come after. Civilization was still distant, but the journey toward it had already begun. As the Earth's climate shifted and the Pleistocene epoch unfolded, a new and formidable challenge emerged for humanity. The Ice Age. Vast glaciers spread across continents, seas froze at the poles, and temperatures dropped to levels that made survival a relentless struggle. For the first time, humans would face not only the dangers of predators and scarcity, but the very force of the environment itself. Yet, in this frozen world, innovation, cooperation, and resilience would allow our species to endure, giving rise to the hunters who would define an era. The Ice Age, beginning around 2.6 million years ago and lasting until roughly 11,700 years ago, was a period of dramatic climatic fluctuations. Glaciers advanced and retreated, rivers froze and thawed, and ecosystems shifted with startling speed. Megafauna, Creatures of immense size roamed the frozen landscapes. Woolly mammoths, their fur thick and long, trampled across tundras. Saber-toothed cats prowled with fangs capable of killing creatures far larger than themselves. Giant ground sloths and massive bison shaped the vegetation simply by their presence. Humans had to navigate a world where every step carried risk, where every hunt was a test of skill and strategy. Homo sapiens, along with other contemporary human species, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, had adapted to survive in these harsh conditions. Their bodies were robust, with stocky builds to conserve heat, and large brains that allowed complex planning. They created shelters from bones, hides, and stone, protecting themselves from the cold and predators alike. Fire became a lifeline, used not only for warmth but for cooking, protection, and light during the long winter nights. Communities learned to huddle together for safety, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that would become the cornerstone of human society. Hunting during the Ice Age was no simple endeavor. Prey animals were often enormous and dangerous. Woolly mammoths could weigh over 6 tons, and saber-toothed cats could bring down creatures far larger than a human. To survive, humans developed sophisticated strategies. They hunted in groups, coordinating ambushes, driving prey into natural traps, or using long-range weapons like spears and eventually bows. Success depended on observation, patience, and teamwork. It was not merely a fight for food, it was a fight for life. Migration became a way of survival. Humans followed the herds, moving with the seasons to track food sources. Rivers, coastlines, and valleys became lifelines, guiding movement across the frozen continents. Along the way, humans encountered other species, Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and sometimes competed, sometimes coexisted, and occasionally interbred, leaving traces in the modern human genome. These interactions shaped not only survival strategies but also cultural evolution as different groups exchanged tools, techniques, and knowledge. Cultural expressions began to emerge during this time, marking the first signs of human creativity and abstract thought. Cave paintings appeared in places like Lascaux and Chauvet in Europe, depicting animals, hunts, and symbolic patterns. Figurines, carved from bone or ivory, suggested ritual practices or spiritual beliefs. Even in the cold and harsh conditions of the Ice Age, humans were thinking beyond mere survival. They were reflecting on their world, imagining and expressing. Life during the Ice Age demanded flexibility. Humans became adept at exploiting every resource: bones for tools, hides for clothing, stones for weapons, and plants for food and medicine. Knowledge was passed orally within groups, forming the first true human traditions. These were not simple habits. They were survival systems, honed over generations. Each successful hunt, each learned strategy, each shared lesson increased the odds of survival. The Ice Age also forced humans to innovate socially. Groups had to manage resources carefully, allocate roles, and ensure that the young, the elderly, and the infirm survived alongside hunters. Cooperation became as crucial as hunting skill. This period may have been the crucible in which human empathy, planning, and societal organization were forged, laying the groundwork for the complex civilizations that would emerge much later. Yet danger was constant. Predators lurked everywhere, and environmental changes could turn a successful hunting ground into a frozen wasteland overnight. Human survival required intelligence, adaptation, and relentless observation. Every step, every choice carried consequences. This was a world where only the cleverest, most resilient, and most cooperative could thrive. The end of the Ice Age, roughly 11,700 years ago, brought dramatic changes. Glaciers retreated, sea levels rose, and climates warmed. Many of the megafauna humans had hunted went extinct, either through hunting pressures, environmental changes, or a combination of both. Yet by this time, humans were not only survivors, they were masters of adaptation. They had learned to manipulate fire, develop tools, coordinate in groups, and sustain cultures that transcended generations. The hunters of the Ice Age had achieved more than survival. They had evolved into beings, capable of shaping their environment, understanding the behavior of animals, and planning for the future. The knowledge and skills developed during this era formed the foundation for agriculture, settlement, and ultimately civilization. The Ice Age tested humanity in the harshest conditions imaginable, but it also revealed the species' greatest strengths: intelligence, cooperation, and the capacity for innovation. By the end of this frozen epoch, humans had spread across continents, leaving their marks from Europe to Asia, from Africa to the Americas. They had mastered survival in a world of ice, giants, and predators. They had learned to think ahead, to communicate, and to express themselves through art and ritual. The stage was now set for the next great transformation in human history: the birth of culture, the creation of symbols, and the first steps toward building a society that would eventually become civilization itself. The Ice Age hunters, armed with tools, intelligence, and teamwork, were no longer just creatures of instinct. They were the architects of the human journey, laying the groundwork for everything that would follow. From their struggles in frozen landscapes, humanity would emerge stronger, wiser, and more capable than ever before. Their story is a testament to resilience, adaptation, and the relentless drive that defines our species. After surviving the harsh trials of the Ice Age, humans had proven their resilience, adaptability, and intelligence. Yet survival alone did not define humanity. Slowly, over thousands of years, humans began to do more than hunt, gather, and endure. They began to create. They began to imagine, to symbolize, and to communicate in ways that transcended mere survival. This was the birth of culture, the first spark of what would one day become society, art, religion, and civilization itself. Culture did not emerge overnight. It began in small gestures and discoveries, in the refinement of tools, in patterns, of cooperation, and in the early use of language. Humans discovered that they could share knowledge, pass on strategies for hunting, and communicate about dangers or resources. Oral traditions became the first medium for education and storytelling. Through repetition, memory, and teaching, survival knowledge transformed into culture, a body of collective understanding that could be transmitted across generations. Art became one of the earliest expressions of culture: cave paintings carved. Figurines and decorated tools reveal that humans were beginning to see themselves as part of a larger world. These creations were not merely functional, they were symbolic. Scenes of hunts, animals, abstract patterns, and even the human form appeared on cave walls across Europe, Africa, and Asia. The act of creating art required planning, imagination, and the ability to represent ideas, marking a profound cognitive leap. Art also served social and spiritual functions. It could strengthen group identity, communicate beliefs, and perhaps even serve ritualistic purposes connected to hunting or fertility. Language, though still primitive, began to evolve during this time. Humans developed sounds, gestures, and eventually structured communication that allowed them to coordinate more effectively. Language enabled complex cooperation, facilitated teaching, and fostered social bonds. It transformed small groups of humans into cohesive societies capable of planning hunts, sharing resources, and passing down knowledge about survival strategies, the behavior of animals, and the dangers of their world. Language, in essence, became a tool of survival and a foundation for culture itself. Rituals and symbolic behavior emerged alongside art and language. Burials, sometimes accompanied by grave goods or arrangements of stones, indicate a growing awareness of mortality and perhaps belief in an afterlife or spiritual realm. Personal adornments, such as beads, necklaces, or painted bodies, suggest the beginnings of identity, status, and social cohesion. Humans were no longer merely reacting to their environment. They were interpreting it, assigning meaning, and creating systems of thought that reached beyond the immediate physical world. Tools continued to evolve as well, reflecting both creativity and problem-solving. Stone, bone, and wood were shaped into increasingly sophisticated implements: knives, spear points, harpoons, and eventually sewing needles. These tools not only made survival more efficient, but also allowed humans to manipulate their environment in new ways. Clothing and shelters became more complex, enabling humans to inhabit colder climates and diverse landscapes. Each innovation reflected a growing understanding of cause and effect, of experimentation, and of foresight, the hallmarks of culture. Social organization grew more intricate during this period. Small groups of humans became communities with defined roles. Some individuals specialized in hunting, others in tool-making, and yet others in gathering and preparing food. Leadership structures, rules for cooperation, and systems for distributing resources emerged organically. These early forms of social governance allowed humans to operate collectively, coordinate large-scale hunts, and defend themselves against predators and rival groups. Social bonds, reinforced through ritual, communication, and shared experience, became as crucial to survival as physical strength or intelligence. The Ice Age had tested humanity with extremes, and those challenges left an indelible mark on culture. Knowledge of seasonal cycles, animal behavior, and environmental patterns became essential. Humans learned to predict weather, locate water, and navigate vast territories. They mapped the world in their minds, passing knowledge along through storytelling and observation. This early understanding of natural patterns and environmental cues formed the basis for later developments in agriculture, settlement, and organized society. As humans spread across continents, culture diversified. In different regions, groups adapted their tools, hunting strategies, and symbolic expressions to local conditions. While the core impulses of creativity, cooperation, and ritual remained, their manifestations were shaped by environment, climate, and resources. This diversity laid the foundation for the rich tapestry of human cultures that would continue to evolve over tens of thousands of years. By the end of this era, humans were no longer just biological survivors. They were creators, thinkers, and innovators. Culture, in its earliest forms, had become a mechanism for survival, a framework for social cohesion, and a medium for imagination. Art, language, ritual, and social organization transformed the human experience, giving life meaning beyond mere existence. The birth of culture marked a turning point in prehistory. It was the moment when humans began to assert influence over their environment, not only through tools and fire, but through thought, creativity, and cooperation. They were learning to manipulate not just the world around them, but the perceptions and behaviors of their own species. The seeds of civilization were planted in these small acts of expression, communication, and organization. As humans continued to explore, adapt, and innovate, the stage was being set for the next revolutionary step, the edge of civilization, where the domestication of plants and animals, the establishment of settlements, and the invention of agriculture would transform life forever. The first whispers of society, the earliest sparks of culture, had begun to echo through prehistory, and humanity was ready to answer.